Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take those stacks of articles and research and, well, we try to boil them down into the core insights you really need. Today, we're navigating a really intense personal landscape. It's that crossroads a woman faces when a long-term, familiar but struggling marriage meets the just undeniable force of a new, passionate relationship. It's an old story, but the patterns our source material uncovers, the friction points, the logistical nightmares, all of it, are surprisingly modern and predictable. The stakes are incredibly high. You're talking about children, money, identity. Our mission here is to really extract the key factors that either prevent or, enable starting a whole new life. Okay, let's unpack this.
You're so right. These stories feel completely unique when you're in them, but when you step back and look at the data, the whole emotional architecture of this dilemma is, it's remarkably consistent. So we're here to pull out those predictable points of friction. Why does the marriage fail to hold her? Why is the new person so good at filling that void? And maybe the biggest question.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.
What are those heavy, non-romantic barriers that keep her stuck?
That's it, exactly. The starting point for you, whether you're facing this or just watching someone go through it, is a pretty stark choice. Do you stay in a familiar life that's stable, even if it's imperfect, maybe even cold? Or do you just dive headfirst into this passionate new love that is, by definition, high risk? It demands a total restructuring of your world. We have to start, I think, with the conditions that create that void in the first place.
Yeah.
The sources, they catalog the decline of a long-term marriage with just agonizing detail. We often say couples grow apart, but the research shows it's less about simple distance and more about a consistent, a structural failure in emotional delivery.
Right.
What are the symptoms of that breakdown?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It creates an emotional desert at home, and
Yeah.
it's not always about big fights. It's more about the consistent denial of emotional validation. A pattern emerges where the husband, often he doesn't even realize he's doing it, just stops giving the attention and the respect he once did. And that neglect, it slowly morphs into coldness, indifference, or even just subtle rudeness.
So she starts to feel invisible,
Right.
right, in her own home, even if, the bills are paid and the house is running.
Exactly. The relationship stops being a partnership and starts feeling like just cohabitation, two people living parallel lives under one roof. And sure, the sources confirm there's conflict, but the real failure is the disappearance of meaningful intimacy. It leaves this profound need, both physical and emotional, totally unmet.
The marriage becomes a source of stress, not comfort.
That's it.
And then, into this emotional desert, the new man arrives,
Yeah.
the lover. And the material says he's rarely a total stranger, right? He's often a colleague or maybe an old friend.
That familiarity is key, yes. He
Yeah.
enters the picture, often at a moment of, peak marital crisis. And his appeal is so successful because it's a direct, precise contrast to that marital void. He provides the exact fulfillment she's been starved of.
And what does that fulfillment look like specifically? It has to be more than just a few compliments.
Oh, it's a total replacement package. It's all about intense validation. He gives her focused, sustained attention. She feels seen and heard maybe for the first time in years. He seems to understand her effortlessly, finishing her sentences, offering support before she even asks. And yes, he showers her with compliments, which is a powerful psychological antidote to feeling invisible at home.
So he's giving comfort, care, gifts, and a connection that's both emotionally supportive and passionately intimate. It's a whole different world.
It is. And what's fascinating here is a crucial distinction the source material makes about intent. For men in this kind of dynamic, the affair can often be, compartmentalized. It's a fling, a way to blow off steam. But the sources are clear that the woman in this situation often sees her lover not as a distraction, but as a potential replacement for her husband.
Wow. That just raises the stakes monumentally, doesn't it? If he's a potential replacement, then she's not thinking about an affair, she's thinking about a divorce.
Precisely.
She's looking to change her entire life structure.
The goal is structural change, which means the emotional stakes are just inherently higher for her. She's not trying to manage the situation. She is actively looking for an exit strategy.
So if the appeal is that strong and the marriage is already this emotional desert, the question becomes, why doesn't she just leave immediately? And here's where it gets really interesting. Because the non-romantic obstacles, they're often heavier than the passion pulling her away.
Right. The sources are very clear on this. The decision is never easy. It's never quick. The weight of dissolving, a decade or more of a shared life is just crushing, even when that life is unhappy.
Okay, let's start with the internal roadblocks.
Yeah.
The sources point to these big moral and ethical dilemmas. But wait a second. If the marriage is already so cold and indifferent, haven't the emotional vows already been broken? Is this a genuine moral conflict, or is it more like societal programming about what a good wife should do?
That's a very sophisticated question, and the research suggests it's both. The moral conflict is real because the act of infidelity, it often contradicts a sense of self she's built up over her entire life. But it's also compounded heavily by external pressure. The fear of being judged, of being seen as the one who broke up the family, it's immense. Society and family can create an almost insurmountable barrier.
And tied right into that is family responsibility. If there are children involved, that's the single biggest anchor.
Absolutely. If there are kids in the picture, the decision becomes exponentially harder. That responsibility often just overrides personal desire. She isn't just deciding for herself, she's deciding how to split their time, where they'll go to school, how to redefine their whole idea of home. The
Yeah.
thought of inflicting that pain on her children is often the strongest counterweight to the lover's appeal.
And then there's just the basic human fear of change.
Yeah.
I mean, leaving a life, even a miserable one, is terrifying. The status quo, however painful it is, it's predictable.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these internal struggles run headfirst into the cold, hard, logistical realities of leaving. You go from a moral dilemma to a very practical one of financial survival.
The sources flag financial dependence as a huge factor. This is like the invisible chain, isn't it? If she's been out of the workforce or earns a lot less than her husband, the threat of losing that standard of living can be enough to just paralyze her.
And even if she is financially independent, you're not just breaking up. You might be starting a financial war over shared assets, dividing the house, the retirement accounts. It's complex, it's often ugly, and it is completely non-romantic. And that reality check can drain all the euphoria right out of the affair.
And then, of course, you have to consider the lover himself. The new relationship was built in what the sources call an illicit bubble. What does that mean exactly?
The illicit bubble is a psychological space where the relationship exists outside of reality. There are no bills to pay together, no arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash, no shared history of little resentments.
No consequences.
No consequences. It's defined by passion, secrecy, and fulfillment.
But the second she says, okay, I'm ready to leave my husband, that bubble pops, doesn't it?
It pops immediately. And now the relationship is subjected to the harsh light of day, and all the uncertainty about the lover's true intentions comes to the surface. Is he really ready for a serious, blended family relationship? Or was this just an escape for him, too?
Yeah.
There's a huge risk that the new man might not seem so ideal once he has to deal with co-parenting schedules and, the inevitable drop in the standard of living.
The idealized romance rarely translates perfectly to the messy reality of starting over. So the decision, it's not really between the bad husband and the perfect lover. It's between a bad but stable life and a potentially good but very risky and complex life.
And these barriers really demonstrate why the third option, trying to maintain both relationships, just isn't sustainable. The sources break down the options very clearly, and they start with the one that's almost guaranteed to fail, trying to have it all.
Trying to have both.
Yeah.
Okay. The source says this is less common for women than for men, but that it almost always leads to failure. Why is it so impossible to maintain those parallel lives?
It just creates an unsustainable emotional and logistical existence. I mean, no matter how hard you try, you're constantly managing two separate, conflicting stories. And the stress of all that secrecy, it bleeds into every interaction. It robs the new relationship of the very openness that made it so appealing.
And the sources use a really powerful phrase for the long-term result of this. They call it an emotional nightmare.
Because that's what it becomes. The relationship with the lover, which was built on passion, starts to fall apart under the weight of lies and tension. Secrecy leads to conflict, disappointment, and just burnout. Neither relationship gets the full, honest attention it needs. So the woman ends up suffering in three relationships: the failing marriage, the stressful affair, and her relationship with herself.
So if having both is basically doomed, the choice really boils down to two realistic options. And they both require a conscious, definitive action.
Exactly. The ultimate decision is binary. Path number one is to stay with the husband. Now, this can mean just accepting the situation as it is, or more constructively, it means a serious, committed attempt to restore the relationship, to bring back that lost warmth.
Which means the husband has to be an active participant in fixing that emotional desert.
Absolutely. He has to be all in. Then, the second realistic path is to leave for the lover. This is your high-risk, high-reward option. It means accepting the whole complex mess we just talked about, financial, familial, logistical, and taking a huge risk for the chance at a new lasting love.
And accepting the risk that the new relationship might not even survive the transition out of that illicit bubble.
That is the risk.
The final dynamic here, and this brings it all back to agency, feels critical. The sources suggest a woman can either make this decision herself, which is the hardest but most empowering path, or she could just wait until one of the men leaves her, which forces her hand.
And the wisdom distilled from all the research is crystal clear. Waiting for someone else to decide your fate is never the ideal path. Taking control, making a conscious decision based on a realistic look at all these factors, that is always the wiser, more empowering choice. You have to be the protagonist in your own story, not a spectator.
We've covered the anatomy of the marital decline, the powerful but often fragile appeal of the new relationship, and the massive hurdles that stand in the way of change. And we've seen how the choice simplifies down to two very difficult paths, or one impossible one. So what does this all mean? The sources really instruct that the most important thing is to listen to yourself, to understand your true desires, and to make sure you're not just being swayed by temporary emotions. The passion is real, but the decision has to be sustainable against the weight of reality.
And that directive to understand your true desires, that's the central command, isn't it? But it's also the hardest thing to do. So it raises an important question for you to mull over. In a situation that's defined by so much external pressure, financial entanglement, and just overwhelming emotional extremes, how difficult is it truly to tell the difference? The difference between a conscious, long-term decision based on your true desires and a short-term impulse that's fueled by the temporary euphoric escape the lover represents. That distinction between euphoria and sustainability, that's the real work. That's what has to happen before any conscious choice can really be made.
Please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You are doing important work.